Good evening, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Let me just double check. I've had a message for somebody to say they can see us, so that's magnificent. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time this evening, joining us on day 4, I think we're on, of British Rowing Coaching Week, which is a really exciting initiative. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce the panel, and particularly our chair of the panel this evening. There's a quick introduction. I'm Rachel Hooper. I'm Learning Education and Development Manager at British Rowing, and I'm really pleased to introduce our chair for this evening, who is Kath Bishop. So Kath learnt to row at university and went on to row in 2 boat races and 3 Olympic Games, winning a silver in Athens, along with a number of World Championship medals as well. After leaving the sport, she worked as a diplomat in the Foreign Office, where she specialised in conflict issues globally. Potentially a transferable skill, as she's also a mum of 2. For the last 10 years, Kath has been working as a highly respected leadership and culture coach consultant, and she's working across sport, business and education. Kath's non-exec board and charity work includes being a trustee and a former chair of the Love Rowing Charitable Foundation, along with being an advisor for the sporting charity The True Athlete Project, and being a steward of Henley Royal Regatta, a very busy woman indeed. She's also an independent advisor to British Gymnastics, supporting the cultural reform following the White Review into abuse in the sport. So probably the most relevant theme for Coaching Week is Kath is the author of the book The Long Win. If you've not read it, I'd recommend getting hold of a copy, which explores how definitions of success can at times hold us back rather than help us reach our potential. It advocates for the redefinition of success, a commitment to constant learning and prioritising relationships in everything we do. So Kath, thank you so much for chairing our panel discussion this evening. We're really pleased to have you lead the session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the reins to you and let you get started.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rachel, and really excited to be spending this evening with 3 brilliant panelists and all of you listening on what is a topic that is very close to my heart, as those introductory words will tell you. So I'm joined by Hannah Vines, Richard Chambers and Tris McLaughlin, and we are going to be really delving into this topic of what does success mean for us as coaches, in a day-to-day basis, thinking about all sorts of settings, whether it's clubs, with beginners, schools, and at the elite level. Hannah Vines is the rowing manager at Dorney Lake. That's her role, is to provide local school children and community groups with opportunities on the lake. She brings a really innovative approach for this because it's about developing life skills here using rowing as the vehicle. She is also a British rowing coach educator, a coach mentor for the GROW programme, an athlete mentor for the Diploma in Sporting Excellence. Richard Chambers is a former Olympic athlete who started his coaching journey at Cambridge University. He always knew he wanted to take up coaching. He was very inquisitive as an athlete. He's now the assistant women's coach at Leander and is also just returned from Belgrade, where he was working with the women's coaching team. Tristan McLaughlin is currently head of rowing at Dulwich College, and he's also doing a PhD which focuses on athlete welfare at Olympic level. So gets that kind of broad academic study into how do we really create a sport where all of the people that we work with, where whatever age they are, they can thrive, where we start to see that perhaps differently than sport has in the past. He began his rowing career as a junior, has been passionate about learning all the way through and understanding the role of coaching in the broadest sense, both in and out of what happens in the boat. He's an ally for women who coach and proactive in supporting the development of new coaches. It's important to say that all 3 of them are British Rowing Level 4 advanced coaches. And whilst that looks really good on the CV, it's actually been, I think, a lot of the discussions they've had on the way to that qualification that's been part of getting to this evening's conversations. And the fact that that course has often asked them to really question quite deeply their why, their personal whys, why they're in coaching, what it means to them. And so I'm going to be kind of delving into some of that. I'm going to be asking a few questions of my own, and I also have the questions that have been sent in, for which many thanks. And I'm going to try and weave as many of those as I can into this. So let's kick off. I'm going to ask a really kind of broad question relating to the topic, to say, can you tell us what success means to you as a coach? And perhaps a little bit of an insight into how you've got there, because I'm guessing your answer today might not have been your answer a few years ago. So what does success as a coach mean to you, and how have you worked that out? And I'm going to go to Richard Chambers to kick us off on this.
Hi, Kath. Thanks very much. Great to be here. Yeah, great first question. I suppose where, through my athletic career and where I'm at now, success fundamentally comes down to wins and losses. Now, that's where it's always seen. It comes down to wins and losses, but it's how we get there, I really think, is a measure of success. And quite often a success is meeting athletes' expectations along the way. For me, success is about questioning if I'm doing a good enough job developing and preparing athletes adequately for our senior team day to day within my development role. One of the things I'm really excited about with what the work that we do at Leander is actually the work we do with our gap year athletes. We have athletes that come from school level before they maybe go off to universities, American universities or British universities, and that's very much a transition year. That transition year is not about performance. It's not about performing. It's not about trying to win Henley medals. It's not trying to make under 23 teams. It's a bit of a transition year. It's about how can we help them develop life skills? How can we help them learn a little bit more about themselves so that they're better equipped to go into the real world or onto university? And for me as a coach, I think success is about what are the athletes that I've worked with like whenever they leave the clubs or the teams that I've worked in. What kind of people are they? What do they add to society? How mature are they? That to me is a great measure of success. And I can think back to one athlete that I coached, and she's a Henley winner in the Island Challenge Cup. She went on to write papers, physio papers, and publish physio papers. And for me, that I just took real pride in that. I obviously had nothing to do with that, but I had real pride that actually on her rowing journey and in her academic life, she was able to be successful.
Amazing. I think it's so important to be thinking about, yeah, exactly, athlete, person first, not athlete first. And when you talk about how someone is developing, what they might be adding to society, how what they're learning in this environment can actually make them, play their role as a citizen. What does that look like? When does that happen in the rowing schedule that's so busy, and we've got all of the training schedule and the mileage and all of that? When do those conversations happen?
I think from a very early day. I think rowing. We all love it. We're all here because we love rowing. Rowing's an amazing sport. We love it. But let's be honest, it's hard work, it's time consuming, and it can be all encompassing. And if someone ever says to me, I'm going to do rowing as a hobby, I'll probably challenge them on that, because I think it's very difficult to do it as a hobby. You do 1 or 2 sessions a week, and before you know it, you're doing 5 sessions a week on a written training program with a professional coach. But I think for those young athletes, it teaches them dedication, it teaches them stickability, it teaches them how to work through hard times, it teaches them how to communicate, it teaches them time management and many other skills along the way that means that hopefully when they go into the real world or the big bad world, they'll be much better equipped than say if they hadn't come through our sport of rowing.
Yeah, completely agree. Hannah, tell us, what does success as a coach mean to you?
Hard to summarise really. Obviously I'm working at the participation grassroots level, and for me success is an element of seeing a young person take ownership for their behaviour, and particularly a choice to change their behaviour, because that, when you deep dive into something like that, especially with say a 12-year-old child that is still trying to work their way out in the world, if they make a choice to make a change in their behaviour, I really want to capture that and reflect it to them, because I think they're still trying to work out the rights and the wrongs, and they need us to give them some guidance about their decision making. And so when I started my coaching journey, I was very much, here's a technical model, these are my athletes, I must coach the technical model. And there was nothing wrong with that. There was no harm done in any way, shape or form. But I attended a training session with the Youth Sport Trust, and that really flipped my thinking. And I was introduced to this concept called comfort, stretch, or panic. And this related to the behaviours. So this was around behaviours that young people choose to present to you, and I know it's very easy to label young people as kind of choosing the negative ones rather than the positive. And this kind of goes along the theme that if a young person is in their comfort zone, they will probably present some form of behaviour because they're not engaged. If they're stretched, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be inquisitive, and they're going to be challenged. If you ask them to do too much, they will go into sort of a panic state, so they become fearful. And again, those behaviours present themselves as being, you know, maybe obstinate, I don't want to do this, and things like that. And for me, I started to really start to understand that if I want to affect change in a young person, how do I get them to stretch? And in the very short window of time that I have with an athlete, how do I capture where they are, get them into stretch or bring them back? But at the same time, I've also had young people that have stood at the front of the pontoons at Dorney Lake in absolute fear and terror, in tears. And I think alongside my coaching journey, I've really started to understand the power I have as coach to influence. So I can give examples, as Rich was saying, where young people have been really fearful, and as a coach, I managed to guide them, you know, into that element of psychological safety and get them on the water, to be coming off, going and be absolutely beaming that they took the risk and they made a choice to have a go. And that for me encompasses a lot of what I see as success.
Brilliant. When you're, there's some few tips there for, I think, from a parenting point of view about comfort, stretch and panic as part of that as well. And a good reference to the Youth Sport Trust, who actually have a great website full of kind of information helping the sort of quality of physical education training and teaching and stuff like that. So a good nod to maybe have a look at some of what they offer. If you're going to give sort of one tip to, you know, what's one of the really key things a coach needs to do to create psychological safety? It's a word, it's a concept, it's a bit of a geeky concept, but it's talked about a lot because it's so critical to learning, to actually being able to be in an environment where you can do difficult things and thrive at the same time. What would you say you've learned? What might you do differently? What's the one thing that's most crucial, you know, as a coach to helping create psychologically safe environment?
I think I actually had this reflected back to be one of my coaches today. We were working with a new group, and it may sound like the most simple thing in the world, but with an athlete is know their name, particularly if you've got rolling groups through a participation side of things. So it's knowing their name and knowing, for me, that you're going to challenge them, and that's okay. And then we can go into the element of challenge, the element of stretch, and actually not achieving is absolutely fine as well. And that, you know, it's not going to be fatal. And that whatever the outcome is, we can unpack that afterwards. But what I need is an element, I would say, trust. And how you get that trust is, I think, is being transparent as a coach, demonstrating you care, and asking questions. I think because sometimes we as coaches, certainly in my own early days reflecting, I was an instructor, I wasn't a coach, I was an instructor. And I think once my coaching turned to being what I would call handrails, not handcuffs, I started to get a very different relationship, and that coach-athlete relationship evolved for me in my practice.
Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it? Sometimes it can feel like things are set up. You're in the launch with a megaphone, and this sort of instructor role kind of flows from that, and we've all seen it, and you know that must be how it's done, and yet it doesn't really connect in the same way. I think it's a really important point. Tristan, I suspect we're already kind of touching on lots of things that are going to connect with your thinking around this, but how do you define success now, and what's maybe changed from when you first set out as a coach? I can't hear you there.
Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, a lot has changed since I first started coaching. I think I was definitely all about winning, and large parts of my motivation of coaching was to not lose. And byproduct of that was to win. So that was my early days of coaching, was all about that, and I think that I valued. I saw my value as a coach was dependent upon what I could write on a CV and what wins I'd had. And then I started to learn on the academic side of coaching in 2012. And just, I think maybe as I got a bit older and a bit more mature, a bit more emotionally intelligent, I started to realise that the person that I'm working with is more important than what they can do. So it became a lot less transactional. And then for success for us, I think in the school program, you have to appreciate the value of everybody in that program, because it's a closed program, so everyone who wishes to sign up is able to, and so you have to make the most of their experience, whether they do one term, one session, or they do it for 5 years. I think retention with juniors is pretty important. I was talking to another coach yesterday, and he was talking about our numbers are a bit larger than normal, and he was talking about this sort of pyramid shape. And I was thinking about this on the drive back from the river today, about as you get older, you lose people. And I thought, well, if you have the triangle there, where do these sort of bits go? And as a junior coach, I think it's my responsibility to try and keep as many of them involved. I don't know how many sports there are that are like that they don't do anything younger, and then we suddenly have lots when they're older. So where are they going? So I think a large part of success for me is retention in the sport, retention with a healthy experience of sport. So even if they don't continue to row, they want to continue to do some sort of physical activity and exercise.
What do you do if you're in an environment where others haven't made that shift, where others are saying, fellow coaches or a headmaster is saying, most important thing is, getting to the weekend at Henley or winning Henley medal, or, if the coaches are sort of, really focused on that kind of old-fashioned results at all cost piece. How have you managed that? Because you must have come across that at times.
Well, I think, there's one notable place where that was, win at all costs, and that doesn't fit my values, so I left. And I think you have to work somewhere that fits your values. I've been very fortunate in schools that I think you become a headmaster because you can see the pastoral side of it, and you can see the bigger picture. So I've always been lucky with who I've worked for. I think that when you hear coaches talk like that, Rich mentioned about the how. So at Olympic level, they're talking about the how. It's not just we won, but it was worth it, even if you had a terrible experience. Actually, the how at school level and the level that Hannah's talking about as well, for all of us, it's important how these kids experience our coaching and the environment that we create. So I think coaches that talk about win at all costs probably don't understand what the cost actually is. They probably think they do and it's worth it, but they probably don't realise just how damaging the longer term impact of that is.
So one of the things is that, the wins is easy to measure. It's easy to kind of notch up on the boards or whatever, the trophy cabinet. How do you measure the environment? That's the key element, isn't it? Creating those conditions. It's harder to put in a spreadsheet. How do you sort of assess how psychologically safe is this environment? Are we on the right track? Am I happy, reviewing the week? What's that environment been like for the pupils that you're working with? What do you look for? What's your kind of metrics, if you like?
I think we would look for some feedback from the kids. I think that if we have a pretty positive environment, the kids can talk to us. So actually getting negative feedback from them would be infinitely better to me than getting absolute positive feedback, because that would suggest that if they do have a problem, they wouldn't be able to speak to us about it. So all the time, I think that we're trying to take into account what they need, and then also factor in what the coaches want. Professionalisation of coaches means that we're all pretty ambitious, and this is our job. So we need to factor that into to making sure that we're in the right role and in the right place as well. So, for example, I couldn't do either Hannah or Rich's job, but I'm probably quite good at the bit I do. And then, so I think knowing the athletes is pretty key, but also knowing yourself as a coach, what's going to make you tick. and what are your value systems that you're going to stay within and not be deviated because you think there might be a win or there might be promotion or something.
Richard, this must be toughest at that elite level, where we know we don't get funding if we don't win the medals. And although we kind of want everyone to have a good experience, fundamentally, British Rowing newsletters telling us whether we've won medals or not. So do you feel a conflict there, or how do you manage the real or potential conflict?
I think, like, at the level I'm at, we all have expectations and expectations on ourselves, not just from an athlete's perspective, from a coach's perspective, to try and deliver good results or winning results. To get to that point, I think the old school way of being a dictator and doing it, okay, this is my way, got to do it, so that's long gone. I think it's much more about the relationships that you develop with the athletes. I think if you have a two-way relationship with the athletes, and Tristan talked on it really well, and I think that feeds up to us as well, is that if you have a group of athletes that feel that they can feed back, they feel that they can have open conversation, and everything is two-way, actually you're going to have a better relationship, which means that the results at the end will hopefully be better, or they're a product of all of the good work that you've done throughout the season to get to that point. I think, I used to have a coach, Rob Morgan, who, he was absolutely brilliant. He didn't actually see us. He didn't see himself as our coach. He said, look, I'm here to guide you. I'll give you some nuggets of information. I'll tell you what I think. And either we can take that on, the five of us, and we can build and develop it, or you can turn around to me and say, no, we're not interested in that, and we'll find something else, and we'll find a different avenue. And for me, that's about a collaboration. That's about 5 people or 4 people working together to get to an end goal. And sometimes we get to it, sometimes we don't get to it. But I think there's definitely a way of getting there, which doesn't mean we have to be challenging our own values.
Yeah, nice story. Do you kind of have discussions around, how safe does the environment feel psychologically with other coaches, either in the Leander context or in the GB context? What sort of discussions do you have with kind of the coaches around you to go, I don't know, I wonder if people are, and even coming back to Hannah's language, are people more in the panic place than the stretch place? Or again, what exists to help have those conversations? Because it's no one coach on their own. You're all working often in teams, or in many clubs, you've got a team of coaches. So how can what's your experience to help coaches almost have the peer-to-peer conversation about the conditions, the environment, the experience that the athletes are having, and how you can improve that and share what you're noticing?
Well, okay, at Leander, I work with a team of incredible coaches, and we, whilst we do have a bit of a laugh and we enjoy what we do, we always check each other. And if we think that somebody is heading down the wrong path or saying the wrong thing or not working in the way that they need to, then absolutely we'll call them out on, and we're there to support each other. And we have a good team where actually we support each other. We keep conversations going all the time. We're always having conversations about sessions we had or conversations we've had, so that we're able to reflect on those conversations with other people. Our key aim at the club is to create an environment where people can come in as athletes and perform to the best of their ability. And hopefully through our coaching and the environments that we help create, they're able to do that. But we have other things put in place. We have Debbie Flood as one of our athlete mentors, and she's an incredible source of information and a good advocate for what we're doing. But also, I go back to what I said before. It's about the relationships that we create with the athletes, and obviously with the older athletes, we probably have better relationships with because we've known them for longer. And you know what? These grown women are not afraid to come up and tell us if we've got something wrong, or if we said something wrong, or actually they might agree with what we're saying, but it's the way in which we say it, it's the language in which we say it, it's how we present it is sometimes where we need to be better as coaches. And I suppose that's how we keep evolving and how we keep developing as coaches. And hopefully people see what Ross and Matt and Ali and myself have created over the last couple of years, and in 10 years' time, when they come back to it, they'll see that it's an even better version, 10 times better than it was 10 years before.
Just to sort of dive into a little part of that, because I think like everybody wants to work in an environment like that, but it's challenging to almost get to that point, isn't it? You've got to get everyone on board that we're not just going out on a launch and getting the session done. We're actually stopping and being intentional about how we do that. And, you know, calling out another coach, that's a really difficult thing to do. What does that look like?
It happens behind closed doors, and it's look, we all care about, and it happens very rarely. I will say it happens very rarely because we're all on the same page and we all support each other. But we do it because we care. We massively care. We care about our program. We care about our athletes, and we care about providing the right environment and the right place for our athletes to train. And it's there's never a one big discussion about it. It's an ongoing set of discussions. It's constant communication which helps evolve the program, so that we never get to a position where someone's got to have a conversation with one coach, but we're constantly evolving, we're constantly thinking about what we do, and constantly having conversations about it. And we're really clear that, you know, we can, as a group of coaches, we can go into the office and we can have good, strong, robust conversations that we can disagree, we can agree, disagree, have, you know, say our piece, but we make sure that those conversations are behind closed doors and that the athletes don't necessarily always see that or don't see it at all.
So again, it's the strength of relationships, isn't it? Because the calling out conversation is a learning moment, but if you don't have that trust and that sort of psychological safety amongst the coaches, then you wouldn't be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, I'm going to jump to one of the questions that we were asked. Hannah, I'm coming to you. This coach said, I'm the new beginner racing captain of my club. Where is the best place to start when coaching new rowers?
When I originally saw this question, I originally wrote, meet them where they're at. And I think, although it may sound a bit like the health and safety hat you wear first, I think you do need to get a little bit of background on each of them. Because I think that helps strike up the relationship. I think the one thing that all of us will say is that when you're striving for success, and however that is defined in your environment, the relationship is the foundation to get there. And so I think having those conversations with your new rowers, I think from a coaching perspective, I think for the coach, you want to have an idea about what success looks like for you and be brave. I have to admit, I start from a very technical side of things, in terms of skill acquisition. It's literally how you would teach it on a rowing machine. So although warming up from front stops and things like that, but in terms of where I think you need to frame what success for the session by session looks like, so that they can understand the process. And I think that gives you then a foundation from you to work on with that coach-athlete relationship moving forwards. So if they then go away and do some research that says, oh, I've seen there's this competition, or I might want to try this, if they're coming to you with that information, at least you can then work together to break that down about the processes to do it.
Brilliant. So another great question I want to actually ask all of you that one of our coaches wrote in with, one of our audience, was what's this sort of pivotal point for you in your coaching career? What's been a kind of a moment crystallizing something for you, learning, or just suddenly you realized, I don't know, it might have been an achievement, might have been a failure. What's been a pivotal point? Hannah, I know you'd sort of we're reflecting on this one as well. You can kick us off on this.
I think for me, some of my, and I kind of welcome it, is some CPD that I've done, was that I did some CPD about human movement and physical literacy, and I had this literally it was kind of a light bulb moment where we were talking about how when we're working with young people, if they haven't been exposed to lots of different sports, or just physical activity in general, because of the nature of kind of the eye posture generation, as I call it. You know, there's normally a device in a hand, and that's way more entertaining than kicking a ball. That's a complete generalization, by the way. And I was on this particular course, and they said, okay, so look at your sport. What is one of the first movements that you ask your athlete to do? And I was like, well, the first thing I want my athlete to do is do a pistol squat. And you could just see everyone in the room sort of looked at me and went, what, how? And actually, when you start to think about it, that is the first physical movement. To get into a boat, you either have to squat your bum to your feet to get in safely, or stand on one leg and do a pistol squat. And you're asking them to do that on an unstable surface. Most people can't do it on a stable surface, or even hold on to something and do it. So I'm already setting my athlete up for failure in some respects if they haven't got that foundation. So it really started to awaken in me that when I'm asking my athletes, my learners, to make physical movements, I need to consider how I explain it, and again, my language and my use of coaching instructions needs to be very, very crystal clear.
Yeah, brilliant. It's a movement I'm observing myself when I get in the boat. Isn't quite as easy as it used to be. And I think it's it's an interesting growing area, movement, thinking about, mobility, and we tend to think about it, getting in and out of the boat only. And I think there's some interesting work now, just people being more inventive, that movement in itself as a sport, actually understanding our bodies and sort of being able to incorporate movement in, as a sort of almost a session in itself. There's some really innovative stuff out there I've been looking at recently, thinking, rowers need to do this. They need to understand how to move their bodies out of the boat as well as in it. Pivotal moments, Tris, what's coming up for you when you reflect on that pivotal point for you that's made you the coach you are?
Yeah, many, but I think I've been very lucky in my career. I do think that I went into my first lecture in 2012 as an undergrad, but a mature in age and perhaps not anything else student. By that point, I think I'd coached an under 23 and a few junior things, and I was very thought I knew everything. And at first lecture, realised that I vaguely knew how to make boats go quick because I had good athletes, but I had absolutely no idea how to coach. No idea. I had no idea on any of the academic side of it, or any of the just where our ideas come from. And I think for me, that first lecture, sitting in that room as someone who had made a career as a professional, realizing that I didn't know anything, was instead of being a problem, was actually quite exciting, because I already thought I knew everything. So I obviously moved on to the stage of realizing what I didn't know, and then was able to go and find out a bit more. And so that's for me was a massive alarm, but also a light bulb moment of there's so many more opportunities here for me to get better, because I don't know any of this stuff.
Great. Richard, pivotal point.
I think mine's a couple of years ago when I was back at Cambridge University, and at the time it was Steve Trapmore who was the chief coach up there, and we were sitting after each session. We'd sit in the office and just chat rowing, because it was a really geeky thing to do. We absolutely loved it. We chatted about each of our crews, and I was like, I'm trying to get this point through. I can't get it through. I understand it. I had the knowledge of what I was trying to get across. And he said to me, look, you got to realize that you're coaching 9 people in a boat. When you're coaching, you've got to find 9 different ways of communicating one point, because everybody understands things in different ways. And for me, that really struck a note, because I realized actually my communication is so fundamental. Just because I know it in a certain way, just because I have the knowledge and I communicate it in the way that I understand it, doesn't mean everyone else does. So for me, it's like, and I'm still not perfect at it. I still need to be better at it, and have a long way to go. But whenever I'm trying to coach something, I have to work really hard at trying to communicate in the right way. And we work with some really intelligent female athletes at the club, and I'll say it in one way, I'll coach a point at some way, and they'll go, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And that makes you think, and you have to go, I need to rethink this. I need to revisit my thought process in this, because I need to be able to communicate this better. And it really makes me think, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. But that was, for me, was a really key and pivotal point.
Brilliant. It makes me think of some famous quote, I probably can't quite remember it correctly, that, you know, just sort of saying something, or the act of communication is not, and until it's been, the message has been received, you haven't communicated successfully. So you know, your responsibility is not done because you've said it as you understand it. It's all about how that person receives it, and there are infinite possibilities there. Brilliant. You've all been on this level 4 course, and I was struck there by also sort of Tris talking about, you know, the importance of going back and sort of learning coaching again from a different angle, or maybe understanding some of the theory. And I know sort of you've all talked quite about some of the powerful conversations you've had from, you know, from doing that, because you went on that course at a point where you were all incredibly experienced. You had all achieved a lot in a, you know, in a conventional sense and beyond that. Can you sort of give us a sense of perhaps what were some of the conversations that, you know, again, that made that course have an impact on you? What were some of the, you know, the debates amongst yourselves, or some of the things that maybe probed you to think a bit deeper about coaching? Can you give us any kind of insights into those? Tris, let's go back to you.
So I did my level 4 slightly the wrong way round. So I did my master's degree first with the level 4 students, and then went back to do my level 4 afterwards. So I think that my experience was a slightly different one to everybody else, but I was lucky enough to be part of the coaching cohort in those lectures. And I think that it's a very safe environment, because everybody in there, whether you're everyone's an expert in terms of what they know about their bit, but it's a very safe environment because all of us are trying to understand the academic side of it. And for some people it might have been a while, it might be the first time, and so I think that created really good opportunity to talk on an equal level, and feel that you could make mistakes, or just ask somebody, what would you do in this situation? And quite often the people in that room are probably the ones who give the answer to that question, and are rarely the one asking it. And I think that those environments with the level 4 provided us the opportunity to ask those questions and not feel that we were giving away anything or losing any you know, identity in terms of, or ego. We could just ask those questions and feel like we were collaborating with people that we might not know to get better at coaching.
Can you tell us what some of those questions might have been?
Well, Rich and I were dumb-and-ar about many things to do with the articles that we were writing, and I think that we found a bit of a kindred spirit. I'm going to speak for Rich here. Jump in if you don't agree, but I think that we felt hugely about the values of who we are and how that impacts us and our decision making, and then the athletes that we work with. And I don't know that I'd necessarily come across somebody who was a mirror image in terms of how forcefully they felt about the values of people, particularly at performance level. And for me, that was a big, you know, okay, this is amazing that there are other people out there that you can talk about in terms of performance and welfare. It's not one or the other. And then you get the times where you get challenged on that, which is equally as important. I think Rich and I probably didn't challenge each other enough. We just sort of agreed that things could get better, and yeah.
Rich, what do you remember from the level 4, sort of some of those deep conversations you hadn't had before, or you hadn't had some different questions maybe, or different aha moments?
It challenged me to think about different paths to success. There wasn't a one-size-fits-all. That actually, you know, and Tristan was very good at this. It challenged me on this, but it's realizing that, you know, talking about the challenges that we face within our own rowing environments, or within the clubs that we were maybe a part of back then, and kind of how we measured success, and it was really good with Tristan to bounce ideas about, you know, where I wanted to go, how I wanted to be seen as a coach, and how I wanted to be in the right program that matched what what I wanted to be seen as a coach. I suppose for me, like the other side of it was there was only 4 of our coaches on the level 4, all of different levels, and quite often the coaching conversations would inevitably turn to something technical. But what I realised was that we had coaches on there who coached novices, who coached school kids, who coached veterans at a local club. For all my knowledge of rowing, I could not do what they do. They are incredible in the jobs that they do. They are experts in the role that they do, and it gave me a newfound respect for coaches of all levels, and made me realise actually you can learn something from a novice coach. You can learn something from somebody who teaches veterans. You can learn something from somebody who teaches at school, and not to just always look up the chain and go, actually I can learn from somebody who works at Olympic level or somebody who's got coached Olympic gold medals, but actually I can learn from people at the novice level. And for me, it opened my eyes. I really enjoy going and sitting in the launch with other coaches of other programs, of novice programs or school programs, just because it's just interesting to chat about rowing and to just hear how they present and how they communicate what they want to get across.
Yeah, brilliant. Hannah, what about for you?
I think for me, again, kind of going through the academic work, it was it was almost like the academic work helped me to solidify that I was doing things I didn't know how to label, if that's the best way to describe it. So, for example, we use an awful lot of games and challenges as a way to develop learning and education, so rather than this coaching role. And apparently that's got a label called Teaching Games for Understanding, which I didn't know about until I'd started to read about it. And then that developed my interest in the constraints-led approach to coaching, sort of non-linear pedagogy, ecological dynamics. And that led me down quite a rabbit hole, but one that I was really happy to go into, if that makes sense. And I think one of my biggest kind of takeaways from the level 4 was as Rich and Trish have said, is sitting in a room with a number of other coaches from completely different disciplines in completely different sports, and just thinking, I have a huge amount of admiration. I definitely couldn't do what you did. And it was the high level of respect we held everyone in, and the depth of conversations we managed to have, and the influence and things like that. And the one thing I kind of took away from the constraints was that you can teach an athlete or tell an athlete where to look, but you can't tell them what to see. And that idea that they have that ownership, and our perception of what they are experiencing is probably pretty skewed, and sometimes we need to try and enable them to verbalize to us their vision of what they're seeing.
Wow, that's a brilliant. Yeah, I've never heard that before. I love that. You can tell an athlete where to look, but you can't tell them what to see. And you need their feedback to tell them, because you can't.
And if I give you an example of this, Kath, how often do we teach young people to pull round on one side and all the rest of it? And I know that there are hundreds of clubs that do this, but we'll use rubber ducks on the lake, and we'll say your task is to go and collect them. We'll give you the most basic instructions on how to steer, but now go and figure it out. And then the idea is that we can translate that into, well, you need to maneuver around, up the lake, or if you take this into a club where you develop from us, that actually if an umpire is asking you now to maneuver away from a bank because you're in a crosswind, oh yeah, I remember that duck exercise we did at Dorney, that's the same thing. It's just transfer of skill.
Nice. Where do you sort of continue learning and get that continued support? So if you have a challenge as a coach, if you've got a question now, or you're just finding stuff difficult, where do you have you built a support network, Hannah? Where do you get support? Who do you go to when you've got questions and things?
I think Rich alluded to something. I actually call on the coaches I work with. We're definitely a team of coaches, and there's definitely this unpacking of a session and unpacking on the influence we've had on those individuals. And I think we support each other in that way. and the check and challenge of each other. You know, sometimes I have to wear the hat of, you know, I am the rowing manager, I think you could have done this a little bit differently. But I think we have, as a group, we are transparent as coaches, and I always say this to a new coach coming in: you have absolute permission from me to pull me up, because I will make mistakes, and it just means I'm trying. So I get the support from my other coaches, and I'm definitely a reflective thinker. So we'll definitely have a conversation, say today, and then I'll pick it up again tomorrow and say, oh, actually, now I've slept on it, this is what I'm thinking, and maybe we should go in this direction. But some of the traditional things will be, you know, looking at podcasts, reaching out to other coaches, and having those discussions.
Brilliant. You know, I really love what you said there, unpacking the session, and then you followed that with unpacking the influence we've had on individuals. Because you could unpack the session and go, you know, did they speed their catches up? Did we get the distance done? But actually unpacking the influence we've had on individuals in a session. Wow, I love that as an aim and as a debriefing topic, to be thinking about the bigger picture of your impact as coaches. Fantastic. Right, time is flying along. We were asked a lovely question about what one thing would you tell your athlete before they go out to race? So this is what we all want to know as athletes as well. We want to be told that one thing that will unlock the magic, don't we? We all want it. We watch films, we read books, we, you know, listen to Shakespeare's speeches and all of that. So what one thing would you tell your athlete before the race? Rich, I'm coming to you.
I don't really have anything enlightening here. I think in the summer I had the real privilege of being a part of the senior women's team in Belgrade, and was part of the coaching team that delivered the women's 8 and the women's pair to qualification for Paris. And in the run up, I was constantly thinking to myself, well, what do you say on the day of the race? What are you going to say that's going to make them feel fired up, that they want to go out and work and deliver the race that they're capable of? And you know what? Actually, it comes down to being incredibly process driven. It comes down to the relationships that you've built up over the last 6-8 weeks, or even longer than that. It's still talking about the technical points, how you're going to deliver it. And actually, one of the first things I always touched on before those previous chats was, okay, this is what the warm-up's going to look like. When you do the warm-up, this is what you're going to focus on. This is what we're going to think about in the warm-up. And each race they did, they evolved and had something that they developed from the previous race before, so that when they went into the final, that was the best delivery that they could do. But it was a product of, okay, well, we'd learned something from the heat and from the rep and from the semi-final, and that's kind of what the previous chat was. It was very mundane. There was no like in American TV moment that you could probably film and think we're going to use this for the future. It was just about concentrate on the first stroke, process driven, make sure the blade's covered, make sure you breathe in, ready to press in that first stroke. Okay, then it's like we talk about the first 5, the second 5, and so on and so on, and that will deliver them to the result. And that's what it was. There was nothing else before that. And the thing is, if within rowing, is like there's no point in having anything like that, because actually you vote them 40 minutes before they race. And you're not going to see them before they sit on the start line. So there's no point in like building up all this like amazing energy for them to go and row in 4s and 6s for their warm up. You know, and I think if you think back to like Andrew Randall, and I hope I do him justice here by repeating what he said, but he spoke to the athletes before the championships, and he talked about how they were doing something ordinary on an extraordinary day. Their ordinary in the realms of the rest of the world was extraordinary, but it's their ordinary. It's what they do day in, day out. And when they get to race day, they're going to deliver their ordinary. They're going to be ordinary, but it's just going to be done on an extraordinary day. And for me, I really quite enjoyed that. And it was about, okay, yes, we're just going to go out and do our ordinary. We're just going to go out and do what you've trained for. It's another session. It's just, you know, has a little bit more to it at the end of it.
Brilliant, brilliant. I love this, that, you know, let's release every coach from feeling their there's somehow got to find some Churchillian moment or some Rocky film. We can let all of that go and actually focus in on the performance process that's going to give you your best chance. Tris, what do you say? One thing that's most important to tell your school kids before they race? Is there one?
I reiterate what Rich said. Yeah, there's no sort of Coach Carter moment. I think that the language that I would use for previous weeks is in my pre-race talk. So the same things that we've spoken about, just so that the boys understand what those things are. But one thing, since my first year coaching, this is about my 20th season now, is I always tell the athletes, the last thing after I push them off is I tell them where their shoes are, because I think that we build up this idea that the race is, it's a massive deal, and it is, and for some people that's their dream, but there is an afterwards, and they need, and so whether they've won or lost or done better than they thought or worse, or at some stage they're going to get the boat in and they're going to want to know where their shoes are. And for me, a more message that life is going to continue well after this race. So they roll their eyes, but they know where their shoes are. So I say
love that. Yeah. Even if you win, even if you're Olympic champion, you'll have to lace your own trainers up, and you'll be picking them up yourself.
So yeah, your shoes are there. It's very dull, but it's ever since I started coaching.
I love it. I mean, both of those answers I think are deeply enlightening and really grounded. Hannah, what would you say? What do you tell your?
I mean, for all the racing that we do, which is normally the Bull Cup at Dorney Lake, I mean, we have a lot of familiarity in it. It's the lake you row on, so row 750 metres up the lake racetrack. But I tend to say, again, there will be a lot of familiarity with this about that relationship, but it's be the best version of you. And, that's literally it. You be the best version of you, put together the race plan we've discussed. And you are more than the outcome. The performance doesn't necessarily equal the outcome. And for me, performance isn't an outcome; it's a behaviour, and that's what I want. I want the behaviour, and I want the decisions. So that's about it, really, for our amazing Bull Cup racing. Everyone starts somewhere.
Race is a race. I'm writing down. I'm loving some of these gems. Right. Okay. Final question. There are a whole variety of coaches listening who will be in all of your worlds. So from that, from the Olympic level, in schools, in clubs, in participation, some will be new, some will be very experienced coaches. What's the one thing that, you think could help them? What's the one tip, a question for them to work on when they're thinking about what does success mean? And it's an evolution, isn't it? We don't finish asking this question, we develop it all the time. What's your one tip to people answering, people watching, to help them frame success in a way that will help them coach the best? Slightly, so I've asked that in a long-winded way, but yeah, your one tip to the coaches who are listening, help them frame what success means to them in a way that's going to unlock things for them and their athletes. Richard.
I'm not sure if this will answer your question, but on my notes I'd written down. On my notes I'd written down, don't get complacent. Pete Shepherd once said to me, "You've got two of these and one of these," and communication starts with listening. And I say, get out, listen to other coaches, listen to what people say, listen to how they coach. Really, immerse yourself in other coaching cultures, and you know what? Not necessarily just rowing. Other sports as well, but what I would say is, I think I'd be really clear that within the sport of rowing, there's no room for gurus or self-proclaimed experts, because as soon as someone feels they've reached that point, they've kind of outgrown where they're meant to be. We can always evolve, we can always get better, we can always communicate better. So I always think what I come back to is don't get complacent.
Yep, it's a good one. Hannah, no, who haven't I asked? Hannah, yes. Your tip.
My one tip would be, in terms of deciding what success looks like for you, is take the time to think about what your coaching philosophy is and what your values are, and then you get to ask the question of whether the institution, environment, club that you're at will align with those. Because I think if on your day-to-day you're in conflict, I don't know if you'll get success. So I would say for any coach that's questioning what does success look like for me, I think you need to take some time, consider your coaching philosophy, consider what your values are, and then success will kind of reveal itself. I think it will reveal itself, and a lot of self-reflection and shadowing. That would be my other takeaway, as Richard said, is listen to what other coaches use and the language and the phrases, because there's a huge amount out there to take.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and I know sort of Tristan wants to sort of echo that, and that's fine. You don't have to have different answers. There's, you know, just that clearly resonated with you, didn't it, Tristan?
Yeah, I think that both of them, like the you know, there aren't any gurus, and being value based. I literally wrote value based. I think that ultimately we have to go back to this idea that without athletes, none of the coaching exists, none of the sport exists. It all goes. And so all of our thought process needs to be on what is best for the athletes. And that links in with what Hannah was saying about making sure that you're in the right environment for your coaching philosophy. And whether you're coaching whatever level you are, you're there to meet the needs of those that are there. And if you aren't, you probably need to check your values slightly in terms of why are you there then. If you're there for you, it's not really going to end very well. So yeah, the mixture of the two answers from the other two. Sometimes there's a benefit to going last. That wasn't it.
You're doing my role, summing up. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's brilliant. You know, we kind of looked at this topic of success as coaches and pulled at it from, you know, unpacked it from lots of different angles. We haven't once spoken about the speed of catches. We haven't once sort of talked about almost the logistics, the busyness that comes with coaching. But I think, like you know, the shared curiosity and commitment to really thinking deeply about what it means to be a coach has come across really loud and clear from all of you. And I think that in itself will be huge food for thought for everyone that has listened this evening. So I just want to say, gosh, the hour has flown. I want to say a huge thank you to Richard, Hannah and Tris for being really open, for really sharing lots of views. You know, we've gone through quite a few of the brilliant questions that came in. Some of the ones I planned, I chucked a few others in that came to me, and they've kind of done well with all of that as well. So it's been a brilliant hour, and Rachel, I'm just going to hand up to you to wrap things up and tell us what else is coming this week.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Kath. I've had some messages coming in through emails and texts of people going, wow, this is just fantastic conversation. And I think that's really the takeaway, partly from this session and partly from Coaching Week, is the power of coaching conversations. And as you just alluded to, Kath, it's not been about rowing technique, it's been about coaching. And I remember at a conference I went to a few years ago where somebody was stood at the front and he said, I'm a rugby league coach and I'm here and I'm amidst all these coaches from other sports. I said, if you put a group of rugby league coaches in a room, they'll talk about rugby league. If you put coaches from a mix of sports in a room, they'll talk about coaching. And I think that we can't underestimate the value of talking about coaching among ourselves. Let's not stick to, you know, the three coaches in the room here have talked about the value of coaches from outside the environment that they coach in. And I'm not putting any of them on the spot here, but I know that if anybody was approach them and say, can I come along and either observe one of your sessions or come and have a coffee with you on the riverbank or whatever, that they'd be more than happy to chat. And one of the things we've had going and launched as an initiative this week is the Coach Cafe initiative. So just getting some local groups of coaches together. Doesn't have to be from within your club, doesn't even have to be from your stretch of the river, depending on where you are, but don't underestimate the value of those coaching conversations, partly so you feel less isolated. Coaching can be really, really quite isolating sometimes, and I did the level 4 a number of years ago, and part of that was just having a wider coaching network of people that I could ring up and go, am I getting this right? And that links to the values thing that we were all talking about. When you really understand who you are as a coach, sometimes it's very challenging if you're in the wrong environment, like Hannah said. And I think having those people that you can talk to and rely on and who get it is really important as well. So thank you all so much for your time this evening. I really do appreciate it. This will go up as a recording for time in memoriam for people to listen into. So, and there's been some absolute classy nuggets. I think Kath might write another book on it. So thank you all for your time. Thank you to everybody who signed in, and we'll look forward to seeing you out on the river or down by a lake very soon. Thank you very much.